There it goes.
So if y'all survive.
So should I start talking about the tea or
No,
how it all
no,
started?
Talk about yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start sort of from the beginning so you guys can see like how life just works out sometimes, and being an entrepreneur, it's not always like a straightforward path. But so a little bit about me. So I grew up in Colombia, and I was born and raised there for 13 years. After 13 years, I moved to Florida because of my parents' business. And when I moved to Florida, that's when I sort of like lost all my friends, low-key. And I just kind of started playing guitar. So that's what my passion was for a long time. And since like forever, since as long as I can remember, all I wanted to do was play music. And I did, so I went to Musicians Institute actually, and in Hollywood, and I graduated and I played in a band. And when I was in that band, I met a guy, and the singer of that band was a Mexican guy. So he told me about this tea that turns blue and it's good for the kidneys, and he used it to pass kidney stones. And at that time, I was like 19 years old. I'm 28 now, for reference. I graduated a little bit old because I went to music school right after high school. But yeah, that's kind of how I found out about this tea called palo azul, which means blue stick. And I'll kind of show you now why it means blue stick, why it's called blue stick. So basically, it's a bark, so it's like little sticks, and you brew them in water. And when you boil the water, you get this blue fluorescent tea. And I'll kind of show you what the blue, you can kind of see the blue color there, but it's fluorescent. So the tea only looks blue with light. So usually, like, the way I show it to people is if there's no sun, and the sun is the best way to see it. That's like how I took all the pictures and videos on the website. You can kind of see like it looks way bluer there, but with a flashlight, you can kind of see that when you shine the light on it, it looks blue. And it's like antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, all natural and stuff. And I can tell you more about it later, but that's basically when I found out about the tea. So I started reading about it a lot, and I just started drinking it for myself because I was always sort of like health conscious, and I liked drinking green tea, black tea, white tea, all types of tea, but I was like pretty caffeine sensitive, so I didn't like drinking it at night. And then I just started finding out about this tea, which is caffeine free, and it's also got basically all the same properties as like green tea: antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-diabetic, antimicrobial, etc. And there's other benefits that it has over green tea, which is, for example, it's alkaline. It's a potassium-saving diuretic as well. So I started learning about this tea like just a ton, reading all the studies on it that I could find, and I just started drinking it since I was like 20 years old. And then eventually I got to LMU, I studied marketing, and you know, I had sort of like the idea throughout that whole time, like it would be cool to sort of like start a company and sell this tea, because there aren't really that many companies that are selling this tea, and nobody's really like promoting it, advertising it, so nobody really knows about this tea. And like my roommates would ask me like, what are you drinking, dude? Like, that's blue. And I'm just like telling them about it, and they would tell me like, why don't you just like start selling it? And I'm like, yeah, like I kind of want to do that at some point. Then eventually I graduated, and I was still in the band, still playing music, still was sort of like my dream, you know, and it still sort of is, by the way, but like, you just gotta be patient. And eventually I just decided like screw it, like let's just do it, and maybe this thing does well. And me and the guy in the band who I found out about the tea from, we started selling it online. So then, just like, I'll skip that whole story because it's kind of long, but just like all good bands, we broke up, we had a fight, we don't even talk anymore, and he just kind of went on his own. He moved to Mexico. We haven't talked in like a year, and I just kind of started doing this basically on my own because I still had the idea. I just like really thought that this would be like a cool tea to share into like stores here in America, because it's popular in Mexico, but here not a lot of people have heard of it. So that's where the idea started. So I kind of quit my job basically when COVID happened. I had some money saved up, so I had enough money basically to just buy the tea, buy like 500 kilos of the tea. So I started this is like just literally how I started doing it. So I started contacting a bunch of suppliers in Mexico to find out like, okay, who am I going to go with? And I had like 20 samples. They took forever to arrive because there's like a whole process to import tea, because it's a product, it's a food, considered a food by the FDA, and everything that's considered a food has to go through all these like, you know, like process, like just steps to get through the border basically. So eventually, I got the samples. I tested a bunch of different samples of Palo Azul. I found the one that I liked, and I picked that one, bought the 500 kilos. It also took forever to arrive, so throughout that whole process, like, I wasn't just like sitting around waiting for it to arrive. I was obviously, working on things that you have probably learned about, or you probably will, but like your business plan, your marketing plan. You gotta know everything about your product. You gotta know a little bit about sales at least, because you're an entrepreneur. So when you're an entrepreneur, maybe you're not knocking doors selling stuff, but you're gonna be selling ideas to whether it is investors or customers. You gotta convince people to try out your product at least. So I felt like I needed to know everything about this tea, and I needed to just come up with a way that would sort of like, like compartmentalize all this information about this tea, because there's so much information about it, and I kind of just narrowed it down, and I just literally started writing, okay, this is gonna be like my pitch, my sales pitch. And this was going back a little bit to like before I quit my job. I used to be a salesman. I used to sell windows actually. So I got a job like as a marketing coordinator, but really the job was, my degree was marketing, by the way, so that's why I was in marketing. And the job was actually more like just knocking doors, selling windows, setting up appointments, and just talking about windows. And I kind of started reading a lot about sales because I had to be good at sales. So I just read a bunch of books and I started becoming better. And that basically from that job I was able to save enough money to start this. And it also actually helped me like a bunch, because like we were talking just, Mr. Cho and I right before this, that, obviously as entrepreneurs, you're all here, you all probably have, maybe you all have like some idea of what you want to do in life. You want to start a business, you want to be like autonomous, you don't want to like work for someone else. But at the same time, it's great, like once you graduate or before you even graduate, to get a job and learn from a company that already has like these like built-in processes. So you will learn basically how they do things, like how they manage employees, how they train employees, how they coach employees. So I had like, my trainer, my coach, my manager. There's like different roles for sales, and that's how I sort of structured my whole managerial system that I plan to implement. And we already hired our first employee, who is in Florida, and he's now in charge of the Florida area. So he basically does exactly what I'm starting to do here now, which is demos. So you guys have seen, like, when you go to like a Whole Foods or wherever, or Costco, they're giving up demos and they're telling you about their product. And that's kind of what I do a lot, because obviously this is a tea that you kind of have to show it, because it's hard to describe in person. Because even if I told you like it's a blue tea, you might think, oh, it's blue like Gatorade is blue, but no, it's not blue like Gatorade is blue. It's actually fluorescent. It's like literally like just such a crazy thing to see in person. And so many people, when I show it to them, they tell me, wow, I have never seen something like that before. So that's why I do a lot of demos. And during the demos, you gotta explain to them what it is, because a lot of people think like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like, why would I want to drink a blue tea that's fluorescent, right? And a lot of people do wonder about like whether that's safe. And then I have to sort of explain. So this is all like written out in the pitch, because it's not super common sense. So I gotta teach my employees, basically, you gotta tell them the reason that palo azul is blue is this and this and this and that. It's got fluorescent flavonoids, which are polyphenols that plants make to defend themselves from stress. And those polyphenols basically are antioxidants, anti-inflammatory. That's what makes it healthy. But some plants evolved fluorescent flavonoids, because a lot of plants have polyphenols like fruits, vegetables, teas, etc. But only a few plants evolved fluorescent flavonoids to defend themselves from high energy stress from the sun. So all of this information that I started like sort of compartmentalizing and sort of like, summarizing for myself, I have it all written down. So this is one thing that I would recommend to you, like, you probably know your product inside out, but like put it on paper, write it down. That way you can give it to anybody, and they can just read it, and if they just kind of like memorize it, and you can train them, how they gotta say things, you basically multiply yourself. Because I can't be, doing this thing all over the country. Eventually, I'm gonna start having to hire people here in LA, and then I'm gonna go to other cities, and then I'm gonna basically just start doing what I did in Tampa, but I need people that do the same exact thing that I do, explain palo azul tea the way that I kind of explain it, and just that's the way that you sort of, expand a business.
Just a break.
Because you can't do it on your own.
So what Julian mentioned, certainly when you start a company, you're everything, right? You're the product developer, you're the purchasing department, you're the customs department, but then always, if you're an entrepreneur, you're the first salesperson, right? So whether you're good at sales or don't like sales, you end up being the first salesperson.
Right.
So remember that, and if you're actually good at it, it really helps also. But you don't have to be, but you still have to be the first initial salesperson. The other thing that's important is the pitch. Okay, we're gonna work on that. That's part of the assignment, right? The next assignment. It's amazing that when I meet small business owners, entrepreneurs, but especially small business owners who are a little bit older or whatever, if I ask them, just do your pitch, 30-second pitch, 60-second pitch, to summarize what you're good at, what's special about your product or business, right? It's amazing that most people cannot do that. And I cannot articulate what's special about their business.
Gotta do it.
Yeah.
There's always that one thing that it's really, for me, this is everything. It's the reason why I started this whole thing. It's like your why, and maybe you guys have it in your curriculum, the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek, but if you don't, I recommend reading it. It's like great. It's sort of cemented like some of the ideas that I had, because I sort of had these ideas already in my head, like why it's important to know the reason why you're really starting a company. And he sort of just described he basically dissected everything, and he just makes it more compact, I guess. So that's a great book to read for that reason. But the pitch is really, for me, it's I always end it with this, and that's why I started this company. This is literally verbatim what I say. I was doing this literally 30 minutes ago when I went to a store, and I actually closed them. So it's Marigold Mercantile in Marine. I don't know if you know it, but it's right in front of Creation. But basically, I told them about the tea, and I told them, but not many people know about Palo Azul tea. So that's why me and my family started this company, to share Palo Azul tea with others, because we think that other people would probably enjoy it as well. Something like that. That's kind of pretty much verbatim what I say. And then a lot of people, when they hear that, think about what that tells you. It tells you I am not really doing this for myself to make a bunch of money, which is the reason why a lot of people will do what they do. Because obviously we all need money, and yes, we do need money. I do want money in order to expand and just live, right? To have enough money to survive. But at the same time, that's the purpose behind it. That's the first intention, and that's really what matters most to me. So that is my pitch. I tell them about the tea, but I tell them why I'm doing this. And when people hear why you're doing something, sometimes, I think actually a lot of times it drags them into it. They care more. And there's this little quote thingy that I read from this other book. It says, it's basically from Contagious, which is a great book for marketing. If you're into that, it says, when we care, we share. Simple. But it's true. When you care about something, if you find this super cool surfboard or whatever, then it's just unbreakable or something, I don't know. And you have friends that surf, you're probably going to share it with them. And then especially if the founders tell you, or if they somehow describe to you that, oh, this is why we started this company, because I was on a surfboard and it broke and I injured myself. And that is the reason why now we want to share these surfboards with everybody, so that nobody else has to go through this. So that's just a little example, but that connects you to that company. You feel connected to a company, you care about it. So a lot of people literally tell me this. When I did the demos, sometimes I go to the same store and I'll meet the same customers, and they'll tell me I told all my friends about it. I started this, I did this tea party and I bought a bunch of your product because I just love what you're doing. I love that you started this on your own, your family, to share this tea, and I just love the tea, so I started sharing it with a bunch of people. And that all just came from me telling her the 30-second pitch. And then obviously, we talk more, if they ask me questions, I can talk about this tea literally for days, which is the thing about this tea that was actually hard, because on the website, you can actually see, for example, in the stories section, it's like a huge, I mean, there's a huge story about this tea that I won't bore you with it, but it's like an entire book that I read about it, and I just didn't even know like where to start. Do I even mention the story? I was thinking at the beginning when I was writing my pitch. By the way, the pitch used to be like 2 pages long, and then I started thinking like, you know what, like no store owner is gonna stand there for like 2 minutes just hearing me ramble for like 2 minutes about this tea, so I gotta like shorten this down.
2 pages more than 2 minutes. 2 pages is like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was like long, and I actually timed myself, and it was around, yeah, like 2, 3, 5 minutes or so. Like I started shortening it down, and I would talk about so many things that it's like, you know, for example, like the tea, the phenomenon of fluorescence was discovered in palo azul tea. That's like on several books about fluorescence. Like 400 years ago, they discovered it because the Europeans started coming to America, and they started finding all these plants from like Central America, South America. Palo azul was one of those, and they discovered fluorescence in this tea. They didn't know what it was. So Isaac Newton, you know, the guy, literally the greatest scientist of all time, if not Einstein, he studied palo azul tea, and he has a document and everything that he described palo azul's fluorescence. So there's all these little things about it, and then what happened basically was that they couldn't find the tree where they had originally gotten palo azul from. So all these scientists started going back to Central America. They couldn't find palo azul. They kept like boiling barks, and it wouldn't turn blue. It wouldn't turn blue, and they just had literally, I mean, a span of 300 years where they could not find this plant. And meanwhile, the natives in Mexico were drinking it all along, and nobody thought to ask them. And then this guy, Edwin Saffer, the botanist, a botanist, he basically went to Central America, he started asking the tribes, and he found it in 1913. So by then, people had already kind of forgotten about this tea, and that's when people ask me, like, how come I've never heard about this tea before? That's the little story that I said, basically, because, I mean, it's a long story, and there's a lot more to it, but you gotta narrow down your pitches, whatever it is you're saying. You know, people are impatient. They want it like this, you know. You can't take 5 minutes explaining why your new app is going to be the next new Uber or the next new Facebook or whatever it is. You got to be able to do it in 30 seconds. And if you can't do it in 30 seconds, then you don't have it, you know, I feel like maybe you don't have it internalized as much, and you just got to do it. You just got to dissect a bunch of information and just narrow it down to the most important part, and you focus on that, and that's it. Like, that
Yes,
is
I really like
to your pitch.
I really like your talk about the why, right? The why. Remember the very first presentation I showed you? You remember what that was called? The PowerPoint with all the different entrepreneurs. The PowerPoint was called Purpose of Entrepreneurship.